Welcome back to the Builder's Bench. I'm Craig Larkins. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Pitt Meadows Plumbing. They're also behind Future of Work, which returns this April. It's all about talent, technology, and what's next for construction. Learn more at futureofwork.me. Now, Canada is deep in a housing crisis, and many in the industry believe prefab is one of the fastest solutions that we're still not fully using. Today's guest, Craig Mitchell, is a former VRCA board member and chair with years of modular experience. He recently traveled to Sweden to tour some of the world's leading prefab facilities and see how they're building at a scale Canada urgently needs to understand. Craig, welcome to the bench.
Yeah, it's great, Craig. Nice to be here.
So first question, there's a lot of terms thrown out there. Maybe some people don't know what the meaning is, but there's a couple terms that we do here when we're talking about prefab, modular, and offsite construction. What's the difference between the three? Is there a difference?
Yes, I think this is probably a good place to start because often the nomenclature for prefab gets confused and we end up confusing the terminology really from owners to clients to people in the industry themselves. So let's maybe start there as a good jumping off point. So when we think of an umbrella term of offsite construction, underneath that umbrella, we've got a number of different subsectors. So modular construction, or what we call three-dimensional volumetric modular construction, is one type of offsite construction methodology. Then there's panels, both open and closed wall system panels. There are other types of mechanical components that get built off-site. Those are all different forms of off-site construction. And when we start looking at technology, the entire industry can actually learn from other areas in the world. There's another term out there that often gets used interchangeably, which is called MMC, or modern methods of construction. And those are methods of construction that equate to higher productivity in the construction space. And it means sometimes it's digital technology, sometimes it's actual physical technology that we use on construction sites. So I just want to make everyone clear that when we talk about prefab, sometimes we're talking about different forms of prefab, and then we can really drill into, specific forms such as modular or panelization, for example, as we go along. So, anyways, that sort of sets the groundwork for how we label it.
So today, I guess like a better understanding, would you say prefab is the umbrella, and then the other terms kind of fall under that?
Correct.
All right. So we're talking prefab today and everything that falls under it, Craig. How can prefab move the needle on Canada's housing crisis that we're seeing right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, what we're seeing is we've got issues in the construction sector right now where we have a declining skilled labor force right now, and we've got this housing crisis that is taking hold in Canada. We have to build, some estimates say that we need to build 500,000 homes a year to play catch up to the level of to equate or to bring the level of affordability into play. And really what prefab does is it can accelerate housing delivery. It can provide schedule and cost certainty, and eventually provide it with higher quality. I don't think we're there yet in our overall system, and we can talk about that a little bit further. But all parts of the ecosystem in construction all need to play a part. Prefab is just one part of that. And, when we start thinking about permitting and, procurement and all those factors, all of those need to align themselves in the housing delivery ecosystem. And when all of those items all come together, I think we can really make a dent in Canada's housing crisis.
So let's touch on that a bit more. What do you think is holding us back? Is it policy? Is it financing, permitting, and awareness? Is it everything you just mentioned?
Yes, I do think it is everything. I think we need to also understand that right now in the prefab sector at the moment, I would say the main areas of procurement in prefabrication is occurring in public sector procurement at the moment. The private sector really hasn't jumped on board yet because I would say there hasn't been enough good case studies in using prefabrication that provides the certainty that's needed for the private sector to jump on board. And we're also not seeing the price points. Right now, prefabrication tends to be a little bit higher cost, and so private sector is waiting, I think, on the sidelines at the moment for certain elements in the public sector to get better aligned. And so what I mean by that is we need factories at scale. We need, quality and certainty of that pipeline or the supply chain in the factories. We also need to see the financial mechanism too. Right now, we've got kind of a clunky sort of financing arm to the prefab sector, meaning that it doesn't fit well within conventional construction. You can imagine from lean legislation and so forth,
Hmm.
you're building half of your building or three-quarters of your building offsite in a factory somewhere and bringing it to site. How does someone like a bank secure that particular type of product when it isn't affixed to the land? So we need to solve that
Hmm.
hurdle. And of course, permitting is the big one. Permitting, from what I see right now, we need to streamline our permitting process. It takes too long in many of our municipalities to get a building permit or a development permit through. And if we can't accelerate that process, then all of the acceleration or benefits of prefabrication are effectively lost if we can't accelerate that upfront permitting. So we really need to solve that part of the equation.
So how do we do that? How do we as members, how do we as industry, as business owners, I like that word accelerate. How do we accelerate this whole process and really get the attention of Ottawa, here in BC, Victoria, like our governments in general?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we need a good sounding board with all of the industry coming together. And whether that's in the form of an association or some sort of, advocacy group that has all forms or representation across the sector. So that is government. It's, post-secondary institutions. It's First Nations. It's the construction sector. It's prefab companies coming together to advocate to streamline a process from start to finish. And
Hmm.
I really believe that we are at that, really the crux of that particular point in industry right now, where we do need that single voice and going to government to say, yes, we have to have change if we really want to solve this crisis. Because effectively, what we're doing right now just isn't working.
Well, and recently the government, we just had a federal election and a new government coming in announcing a lot of new offices to nation building offices, and one of them being the Build Canada Home. So, is that type of a nation building housing government branch that we should be focused on as well? Do you think they have the tools to advance out of the space that we're currently in with prefab?
I do believe it's possible, but the current program, the way it's set up right now, will not do that at the moment.
Hmm.
We need to take a long-term view. You mentioned, my trip to Sweden and what I saw there versus we are, what we are currently doing in Canada with the Build Canada Homes program. And what I saw there is they look in terms of generations, in terms of the way they build homes there. They don't look
Hmm.
at just business cycles or as a quote unquote program, because I feel that the Build Canada Homes and other government funded um, programs that have taken hold are really short-lived. They follow political cycles or business cycles to address a need that we see immediately in front of us. They don't think in generations, and that's what
Hmm.
I saw in Sweden. Is they're making decisions that they feel are going to last for 50 or 100 years out, and they recognize that that country is always going to need homes, and so they're building for the next generation. And
Hmm.
I believe that we've often taken a short-term view here in Canada, that we need to look further out and support an industry and incubate it a lot further. And I think that's the opportunity that's in front of us with Build Canada Homes, is that we shouldn't be looking at this as at this as just a political football that says
Hmm.
we're going to do this for the next 5 years. We need to really think 15, 20, 25 years.
It's interesting you say that. I've had so many conversations about how politicized infrastructure investments are, how politicized, like you just said, the Build Canada Homes card that continues to be played in different parties and realms. So, yes, 100% agree with you on that. So let's jump into Sweden. You
Mhm.
toured some factories. What do you think jumped out the most to you?
Yeah, I would say the big things for me that I saw was that they took a real, I'll call it a platform approach um, to building, meaning that there's a lot of standardization that I saw. Now,
Hmm.
keep in mind that's an ecosystem there that has been developed over 60 years. They started with a program back in the 1970s and 80s where they wanted to build 1 million homes over 10 years. Keep in mind that was with a population of 8 million people, and they
Hmm.
did it. And so this whole industrialization of infrastructure and housing there really took hold. And that's that was one of the big things that I saw from an acceptance standpoint is that they had this program that allowed them to accept offsite construction as a methodology and you know to to really everyone in the country that they don't think twice about having a home delivered on the back of a truck.
Hmm.
Whereas here, I think there's some stigmas here in Canada that we need to get over that, and we need good case studies here in Canada that can help us. That I believe that can help us get there.
It sounds like that is just the norm for them everyday life when you see that. So if Canada acts now, how big could this industry get? And if we don't act, besides the obvious, what's the risk?
Yeah, well, I think we'll have a lot more status quo. We'll be complaining that if we if we don't change, we'll be talking about the same issue of needing 500,000 or 1 million homes a year, 10 years
Hmm.
from now. And so I really think now we need to make a dent. And so, right now, modular construction only makes up 5% of the overall construction volume. And I would say offsite construction, all forms of that, is probably less than 10%
Hmm.
currently in this construction sector. So, we've got a lot of room to grow um, to adopt different forms of offsite construction. So I think at the moment, how big could it get? Well, Sweden is a good example. I mean, right now, 90% of all single family homes in Sweden get built in some sort of factory, whether that's panels
Wow.
or modular construction. And 30% of all their multifamily uh, housing gets built out of a factory in some sort of capacity. And so, when I talk about our volumes here, we're really at early stages and just at the beginning of that road forward. So I really think
Hmm.
that we've got plenty of room to move. But as we talked off the top there, I think we really need, policy changes and again, education and training and things like that to really
Hmm.
start taking root over the next 5 to 10 years to allow us to have those same sort of numbers that Sweden has.
We have plenty of time to move. We just have to get moving, is essentially
We got to
what
get
you're
moving.
saying. So just going
Yeah.
back to what you were just talking about, education, and we're talking about trades as well, and we were talking about earlier labor. Will a shift to prefab modular require different skills from the trades? And do you think we're ready for that, given our current situation here in Canada?
Yeah, it is a different trade skill. There are, sure, there are electrical and mechanical trades that will use a lot of their same skill sets, but I would say that we're going to end up using smaller crews in the future. You can imagine, again, say 70% of a building gets built in a factory and
Hmm.
the 30% is left on site for the trades to complete. And you'll use smaller trades. But I think the biggest issue that I see right now is that there we're not educating for the future in that certain skill set. And I would say
Yeah.
the only area that we are starting to see that now is in the field of mass timber. BCIT here in British Columbia has done a great job. They've got a school of mass timber, construction, and they're training for installation of mass timber components. I think we need to go further and start looking at, panelization and modular construction are all going to be part of our future. So how do we start bringing those trades along, getting them involved and educated in terms of how to develop that workforce? And right now
Hmm.
it's all sort of passed down through, companies and generations of that particular trade or craft. But there's
Hmm.
no formal schooling currently in play. So.
It sounds like when we're just talking about this topic and all the factors that relate to it, we're on the cusp of this movement and this momentum. We just need that movement and momentum to really push it over that edge. Thank you, Craig, for joining us today. Is there any final remarks that you wanted to offer?
Yeah, I think, as we just talked about, from a trade and skill set standpoint, I really believe that our workforce, we need to concentrate on productivity because what we have seen in the past, we are not going to solve our labor issues by just adding more labor because our people are not going to be there in the future. And so it's all
Hmm.
about productivity of that worker. And that's where we need to concentrate. And this is where I believe that prefab can really make a dent, is that we can do a lot more in a controlled environment off-site and use smaller crews on-site to complete the infrastructure we need. So,
It all makes sense, Craig. I'm 100% in agreement with you. Thank you so much for taking a seat on the bench with us today, Craig. You can find past episodes of the Builder's Bench at vrca.ca. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and invite your colleagues and friends to take a seat on the bench with us. And before we wrap up, again, a quick thank you to Pitt Meadows Plumbing for sponsoring today's episode. Future of Work is back this April, tackling the biggest questions around workforce skills and the future of our industry. I'm Craig Larkins, and this is the Builder's Bench.